Hello, and welcome to Crew Call, the Below the Line podcast by, for, and about the crew. Today's guest is a location manager, Nathan Gendzier. Hello, Nathan Gendzier. How are you today?
I'm fine. It's the first beautiful sunny day in New York in a while, and by that I mean it's up to 40 degrees. I'm actually sitting in my backyard.
Yeah, we're, I think, going to have like around close to 80 today here in LA.
Goddamn smug Californians.
All righty, so you are...
I'm a location manager. Is that what you were pushing for? Okay.
Yes, I was. Is that the actual title, or is there another spiffier word for it?
No, that's the title. Every once in a while, we end up being something else for strange reasons. Sometimes we're an assistant unit production manager. Sometimes we're a production supervisor. That tends to be more about if there's any weird union stuff going on.
Okay, so it just depends on what's going on.
95% of the time, it's a location manager.
Okay, and how is a location department structured?
It grows like a gas to fill all available space. If I'm doing a full movie,
yes,
I'll get a script God knows how long beforehand. And I start off on it all by myself, and I'll do a first read through the script, trying to just be a reader enjoying a story. I try really hard not to be thinking about any of what's going to go into making that happen. Just pretending I'm at the movies, but it's in letters. And then the next time I go through it, I'm like really looking for particulars of, what kind of places are they, just from the standpoint of, it's a house. Is it a rich person's house? Is it a really poor person's house? Where in between? What kind of things have to happen there? So, does this house have to have an indoor swimming pool? List goes on. And sometimes there's a really specific piece of movement through a house that'll tell you, okay, I need a kitchen with an open space in the wall between the kitchen and the dining room, and this, that, and the other, where suddenly it gets really specific as to finding pieces that have to exist.
That makes sense. And honestly, I didn't even think about that myself. When, you just think, okay, the location, where they need to shoot, which is going to be more, easy for them to shoot, the look of the outside, the exterior, the interior, but you don't think of those specifics.
One of the nice things is that it's not uncommon to start a location manager even before the production designer is on. And granted, the production designer is going to have a huge stick, but I can present some things that, maybe get the production designer excited in a direction they hadn't even thought of. On the other hand, I can give them a whole lot of stuff the first day they start, and all of it gets rejected because the designer, it tells me I'm just wrong about what any of this should look like.
Okay. And do you usually have an assistant with you?
Well, as time goes on, you start adding to the department. As soon as you really get started, you're going to add a bunch of scouts. And the first scout you hire tends to be the person you want to have on as your assistant location manager. Depending on how big the job is, you might have 2 or 3 assistant location managers. 3 is pretty over the top, but, and this is me talking about features. If it's television, it's completely different because the location manager is overseeing one episode after another and has one assistant location manager for one show and another assistant location manager for the next show. So for something like that, there's 2 completely separate locations departments that are overseen by one location manager who never gets to do anything but go around with the director in the van looking at stuff for next week.
So for something like that, for episodes, it has to be quick.
It's really quick, and it's really exhausting. And, hopefully you've got a lot of good files, because a lot of what you want to shoot for something like that you should be able to pick out of a hat and be concentrating on the big, unique locations for the episodes. There's a lot of stuff that shoots out of town, but comes to New York to shoot exteriors, and they'll come, once or twice a season to do, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And those are kind of fun as well.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of doing the never-ending episodic, though. That one is just a killer.
Well, now
and I take my hat off to the people who do it.
Yeah, now some of those are going to be in the same spot, though, right? The ones that keep on going?
Well, I mean, if you watch a show like Law and Order, but they've got massive files going back years, because those are the same people who did. And Law and Order was on forever and ever and ever. Before that, it was the same producers as The Equalizer and a couple of other shows, I forget what. But they've got 20-plus years of building up files. So for a lot of stuff, just it's this apartment, that apartment, a lot of it, they're going to do file pulls and find stuff that looks good and go back to them. But then again, a lot of those things disappear over 20 years or change. And, people write new things into episodes. So, that's the big ticket item that you end up concentrating on. And then they can't afford to move around. So if they've got a half a day in an apartment, they better find 4 street scenes to do right downstairs around the corner from where the trucks are already parked.
So you're constantly like observing and changing, and you just really have to be aware of all the surroundings and everything that's going on. It
changes. It's the same old, but it's different every time, if that makes any sense.
Okay, yeah. So now what does a scout do specifically different than you?
A scout can be somebody who's been doing it for years. It can be an entry-level position. But a scout is somebody who I'm going to sit down and, I'm going to have them read the scenes they're looking for the location for, say it's a restaurant or whatever. Once again, I'm going to go through the logistics of what has to exist there. There's going to be a bar fight breaking out and then shots fired and this, that, and the other. So you have to find a place that's willing to deal with that and has a layout that lends itself to it. And, once again, it's, what does this restaurant say about the scene? Sometimes the script will say it's a Mexican restaurant, and there's a very, very good reason it has to be. Sometimes you'll read the script and you'll say, well, there's nothing really about it being Mexican that's important to the story. And some other restaurant that just has this great wall of glass to throw someone through. I would show that French restaurant because it's got something great for production value. And once again, the director may hate that idea, but we try and put as much stuff in front of the director as possible.
Okay. Like you said, you get the script first. So after you get the script and you read through it, then you sit down and you hire scouts?
Okay. I do a breakdown, so I know all the locations I need. You're hoping that interiors and exteriors will be at the same place, but it's not uncommon at all to shoot one interior and pretend some other place is the exterior for it. Once I've done a breakdown, I start hiring scouts to go out and look for all these things. And I'm probably out scouting as well, but I'm going to be spending a lot of time at my desk, so I need a lot of other people doing legwork. For my preference is to have a week or so for the scouts to, build up a log of stuff worth showing the director and the designer. And once we've got that, we start going out on director scouts where, maybe he looks at 15 apartments by pictures and trims it down to 5 that he thinks are worth going to look at in person. So myself, the director, and the designer, certainly, sometimes the producers will come along. If you're picking a location that's heavy on, the scene is heavy on visual effects or on stunts, you try and bring along those folks so they can, say whether or not it works for them. Because it really stinks picking a location with the director and the designer and then finding out that
the stunt guys can't do it.
Are not possible. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So you try and narrow that down first. And as you're going on, you start ticking off locations. We know where we're shooting this. We know where we're shooting that. And the goal on every movie is that by roughly a week before, when you're going to do tech scouts with the crew, you've got all your locations lined up. Now, there may be some other location managers who are a hell of a lot better than I am, but I've never started a movie with every location chosen.
So then that comes to my next question would be, okay, you know how you're saying you find something that's perfect for everyone except for the effects. When would it be the time that you guys are like, okay, let's build a set for this instead of using an actual location?
When it comes to deciding whether you're building a set or shooting on location, there are a lot of things go into it. There are some things where you're going to have so much shooting there that it just makes sense to build a set, have it in a studio that's under your control. You can go to it any day you want. You know, a side effect is you have a cover set in case there's bad weather. But, you know, it might be a lot cheaper to build a set than it is to shoot for a week and a half at some really opulent mansion. It's also nice to be able, for certain types of scenes, it's really nice to be able to pull walls out, which you obviously can't do on a real location.
Right.
There are a lot of different variables. Now, granted, as a locations guy, I rarely push someone toward building a set for anything, but you know, it's happened. I've suggested that something would make more sense as a set than trying to find a location for it.
Now, are there different kind of scouts? Is there a tech scout?
Well, I was mentioning before, there's the scouts out on their own. They're bringing in pictures of places that are available. Then we do the director scouts, which is you've narrowed it down from looking for the pictures. You don't go to all 15 or 30 apartments. You go to 5 of them. And the director picks places he likes from those director scouts. The tech scouts are the last thing you do before you're shooting when you go back with the key grip, the gaffer, the sound man, you know, everybody, every department head essentially. The director will walk the crew through what we're shooting there. The AD will walk through how we're shooting it there. The AD will get pretty specific saying, okay, we're going to shoot in this room, the day scene, and then we're going to move into the backyard so that the grips have time to tent the windows and we can shoot a night scene in the same room. And at that point, somebody in the crew may point out a problem with that nobody else foresaw because department heads focus on what they have to do. So tech scouts, if they're done right, are just invaluable and make the shoot go so much better because every department gets to chime in on what is going to be necessary in order for them to do the job the director wants them to do.
What location is like the most difficult to shoot at? Are there certain types of places that are really hard, like outside beaches, you know, mountains, or is it harder to film inside a place, like let's say a museum or, like you said, a mansion or something like that?
You know, once again, all of these have different things about them that are difficult to deal with. I've been reading where shooting beaches in Los Angeles is very difficult because of the bureaucracy you deal with out there. The people who are in charge of that for, I'm not sure if it's city, state, or county, but that they're not easy to deal with. Here, you know, going into a museum is always difficult because it's full of priceless artwork. In a lot of cases, they'll dictate to you what type of light you're allowed to use because certain wavelengths of light might damage paintings. You know, getting a crew in and out of a small house is terrible.
What has been, in your career, something that sticks out? What was the most difficult place to film at?
To be honest with you, from my end, difficult to shoot in typically has more to do with getting all the permission, et cetera, beforehand. Once we're there, it's kind of the crew's issues. And granted, if it's a hard location for them to shoot in, I'm going to hear about it all day. I don't make friends by finding third floor walk-ups with no elevator.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. Now, how about the owners of these places? Are they really hard to deal with? Have you found like a great place, but they say no to you? Then what do you do?
Well, you find lots of places that say no to you. I mean, that's just a constant, and that's happening at the scouting, the early scouting stage. And in fact, I remember vividly someday that I was out scouting for lawyers' offices, and this was back before 2001. In New York, we used to do a thing called floor surfing, and you'd go to an office tower, you'd get in the elevator and go to the top and poke your head out of the elevator at every floor to see if an office looked interesting or not, and then you'd just, blindly approach them. Well, all the buildings have security now, so you can't do that anymore. You can't get past the lobby. But in those days, I remember I was scouting for what was supposed to be a really grand lawyer's office, and I saw something terrific in an office tower down near Wall Street. And it was the end of a very frustrating day, and the woman just sort of snobbily stuck her nose up in the air and says, "We don't get associated with that sort of thing." And I looked at her, and, you usually are just very nice and you say thanks anyway, and you turn and walk away. And I was so frustrated, I said to her, "I've been kicked out of much nicer places than this dump."
Oh. Yeah.
You do get turned away more than not. It's
right.
Just the nature of it.
What would be the best place that you shot at, or the most fun place, or something that was really simple for you guys to do?
There's the college campus here in Brooklyn that I've shot at a couple of times, and every time I go there, setting it up is kind of a pain, because they really want a lot of details that it's hard for us to figure out in advance. But then on the day that we're shooting there, every time we ask, well, is there this, or can we do that, or whatever, they're just like, "It's your place, here, let me show you around the corner, there's something great." And I remember thinking once, I want to shoot every movie there from now on. Granted, it won't serve very well for the horse stables in scene 35 Apple, but it's such a pleasure to shoot there.
Right.
It's very similar. I did a shoot last fall at the 9/11 Memorial, and once again, because one, it's still a construction zone, and two, highly secured, and then everything else that goes along with being a very busy public place, setting it up was very difficult. But when we got there to shoot it, it was terrific. All the people we dealt with, just came through fantastically. Everything we wanted went like clockwork.
Now, is it different working in different cities? Specifically New York versus LA? Is it just there's different city laws?
Well, first of all, in LA, you guys have all these different little municipalities every 20 yards.
Okay.
Whereas New York has a bigger area that's all under the same jurisdiction. It's different everywhere in LA, and this is impressions because I haven't worked much in LA.
Okay.
In LA, there's a lot more scouting by location library, whereas in New York, there's a lot more knocking on doors. But New York, like LA, the people who live here are kind of jaded and sick of having trucks blocking out where they want to park and sick of having to wait at a traffic light for some stunt to happen. And, you go to Middle America somewhere and everybody rolls out the red carpet because it's exciting to have a movie, and the inconvenience part of it is something, they're going to experience for 6 weeks, not every day for the rest of their lives.
Now, when you started out, well, first of all, when did you start out?
I went to Emerson College at the end of the 70s, early 80s, and I found out that on my walk home there was a Griffin Electric rental house, and I kept walking in there every day on my way home asking for a job because I thought, "Oh, great, I'll do something in film." And the guy kept sending me away and finally asked me if I did any PA work. And I said I didn't know anything about sound systems, which he was really impressed by that, let me tell you. So I knew nothing, and I was showing it off. I ended up working for them eventually for about 6 years. moved to New York in the mid-'80s and did the PA stuff for a while. My first locations-related job, I was the parking coordinator on Crocodile Dundee 2, which got me a PA job on Coming to America. And then out of nowhere, I got a phone call once from somebody who thought I was a location manager and wanted me to manage a music video. And I certainly was not about to turn it down because they were paying, compared to what I was getting, really good money.
So you just got into locations because someone just thought that you did location managing?
I was in location. I was working my way into the department on purpose, but I got to manage for the first time because somebody gave somebody my name, erroneously saying I was a manager. I was way underqualified. But I figured it out, and the whole thing got shot, and it went well. And, it made me know I had chosen the right department. We did some big, complicated stuff on that music video, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing.
But did it work out very well? Did it work out?
Oh, it worked fine. It worked fine.
Okay.
This was in the days. Right now, the permitting office in New York City. First of all, now you do permits online. You almost never have a reason to show up at that office. But when I first started, you could walk in and there'd be 4 permit clerks sitting there waiting for somebody to bring them something to do. So they were kind of happy to teach me that whole end of things because they had the time for it. 5 years later, you'd go in and there'd be 12 locations assistants sitting there waiting to get a turn to file their permits. And the permit clerks were all just slammed.
So since you started out, how has the industry changed? Other than it being busier?
Busier is a huge change. It really is. It makes it harder to find places willing to work with you. It makes it harder for you to schedule a shoot because if there's, so many shows going on in town, odds are you're going to want to be in the same place as somebody else a few times during your shooting schedule, and you can't because they got it first. What else has changed? Directors don't like going on tech scouts. They'll usually go grudgingly, but they're not as detail oriented as they used to be. They don't give the crew the time they used to make sure they know what they're doing. I go on tech scouts nowadays, and it's not uncommon to come away not knowing where I can park the trucks to have them out of the shot, because the director really hasn't decided exactly what he's shooting at that location. And I really am generalizing here. There are some directors who you show up, they know everything they want to do at a location, and they'll literally point and say anything from that street light back is never going to be seen. And, that's great. But there are a lot who haven't thought it through in that detail yet. And this is not a thing about a good director versus a bad director. It's just a change of expectations, I think.
So it seems to me that you have to be more, you guys are doing more now because since the directors aren't doing as much as far as those decisions and stuff, they're leaving it more in your hands?
I wouldn't put it quite that way. I'm making up more stuff when it comes to what I'm putting on the permit to cover my ass. I may know that if we follow the script, a car is going to move 15 feet to pull into a shot, and that the whole scene takes place at the passenger side window. I may know that's the extent of what I need, but to cover my ass, I'm going to put on the permit that the car comes around the corner from over there and I need to lock up traffic, and I permit a much bigger scene than we're going to shoot to cover myself. And, of course, if I know we're supposed to shoot till 7 o'clock at night, I make sure that my permit covers us till 11 o'clock at night just so we don't, suddenly lose our cops. Okay.
So what would you suggest to someone who's just starting out in the business and who wants to be a location manager?
A number of times people have approached me and said they want to work in locations, and I'll say to them, If you want to go, unpaid for a ride along with one of my scouts, I'll find one of my scouts who's willing to, have a spare body along with them for, 4 or 5 days. And you see how things are scouted. Because scouting is the entry-level position. PA works a little bit, but even a PA who works as a locations PA, once there's somebody I'm impressed with, they have to learn how to scout. Learning how to scout is the first step toward working in locations. The scout will come back and tell me this person can be trained, or this person is clueless, or whatever. And you go from there. And if somebody can pick it up, you actually do want to nurture that, because you want to have people out. You want to have resources. And once somebody becomes a trained scout, that's another resource for me.
Okay.
You do have to have some people skills to do this. It's the ability to shoot a location is probably one of the lowest parts on the priority list. You've got to get into people's houses. You have to get a read for how they would deal with shooting something. So that's a huge part of the job.
So, communication.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, what else besides people skills would you say they would need to know? Is there any other skill that you would like to see in them?
Some skills that I don't know for sure I possess. I know I possess them better than I did once upon a time, but being unflappable is a really good asset, because no matter what you do, things are going to change, and they're going to change drastically, and you have to roll with the punches.
Now, when you see PAs on set or in the office, what do you expect out of them? Because they're still working with you, aren't they?
Well, yes and no. They're doing lockups, which means they're interacting with the public, and I care deeply how they do that. So if I see someone who isn't interacting well with the public or is kind of overstepping what they should be doing, I will try and fix that, either talking directly to them or talking to the key set PA or somebody. In terms of the folks in the office and the folks on set, I do have my own PAs. So for the most part, I'm trying to be a completely independent department without throwing off any of my problems on the office or the set. Now, granted, sometimes you just need the office to get involved in something you're doing because you're out on location. But to the degree I can, I make it our own problem.
Okay. So, do you feel comfortable discussing what happened with Sarah Jones?
In a general sort of way, but not specifically. Here's what I got to say about that. First of all, I do know somebody who was on that bridge. And I back what they say, which is that there is an investigation being done by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and OSHA and the county sheriff, and this NTSB, I think, is involved. There's a lot of heavy hitters investigating it. And I have no doubt that the exact truth of what happened will come out. I assume somebody will. I have the assumption that somebody's at fault, and I have the assumption that person or persons will be dealt with appropriately. But the fact is, I don't know what the hell happened there. I have some really, really good educated assumptions because I've done a lot of work with trains, and I'm shooting subways next week. But the thing is, I can think of a lot of different scenarios where this person is to blame and that person had nothing to do with it, or some other scenarios where that flips. I can even think of scenarios where nobody's to blame and it really is just a terrible accident. Now, granted, that's a huge stretch, and I doubt that's what's going to come out. But, to assign blame without knowing, I think, is really irresponsible. The last time I was in a situation like that, they closed the track we were on for any traffic but the train we had. And even though it was impossible for another train to be on our track, we weren't allowed to move it until the dispatcher and the guy on our site had spoken, and he confirmed that there's nothing on our track. Once again, educated assumption. Something was very wrong from the beginning is my assumption, but I don't know what and I don't know how. So, I just think it would be irresponsible for me to start saying this person or that person might have been the one to blame.
Well, no, and I would definitely not ask you to give an opinion like that, being that you weren't there and you weren't part of it. But it is quite unfortunate and sad. And hopefully,
it's horrific.
More people
It's horrific and it's troubling as hell. So I hope it doesn't just fade from memory in the near future.
What do you think people should do in the future to prevent something like this? Just what they have been doing, or?
There's a lot of answers to that. I would say that a willingness to say no is important. There are moments where you kind of have to forget about the chain of command and start questioning things on your own out loud. I've been on a show where the AD got flustered and started moving an insert car for a tow rig shot, and the streets hadn't been locked down yet, and it's certainly not my job to abort a shot, but I sure as hell did. Somebody has to be willing to jeopardize looking like a team player to be willing to say no. Now, granted, if what they're saying no to is just penny bullshit, then everybody else will call them on it. But somebody has to be willing to stick their neck out.
Well, Nathan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We do appreciate you. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Have a good day.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
That's it for this week's Crew Call. Thanks again to Nathan Gendzier for filling us in on the life of a location manager. Tune in next week for set lighting technician Michael Taylor. Thanks for listening.